The Checkpoint is presented by GM Pharma, the first international multinational pharmaceutical company in Georgia. GM Pharma, to serve those who need it most.
Georgia has special potential for energy development from renewable sources. It is linked directly to our country's energy independence as well as economic and energy security, stated the Minister of Economy and Sustainable Development of Georgia, Vice Prime Minister Levan Davitashvili, during the Renewable Energy Projects Conference. The event sought to inform private companies in the renewable energy sector about collaboration with foreign financial institutions to promote financing availability and to tell financial institutions about the latest advancements in Georgian energy. According to the monitoring results of Transparency International Georgia, 18 members of parliament had not used their right to deliver a speech in the parliament during 2022 at all. According to the organization, 10 of the mentioned MPs belong to the majority, 6 belong to the opposition, and 2 belong to non-partisan groups. Civil society organizations continue to monitor the fulfillment of 12 priorities defined by the European Commission to grant the candidate status to the country. 8 organizations prepared an assessment document, EU Candidacy Check, which reflects the progress achieved by the Georgian authorities in this context until the period of March 31, 2023, as well as the current state of play and the steps to be implemented in the future. According to CSO's assessments, at this stage, 1 priority is fully implemented, 2 priorities are mostly fulfilled, 4 priorities are partially fulfilled, and 5 priorities defined by the European Union are to be yet fulfilled. U.S. Ambassador to Georgia, Kel Degnan, on Wednesday said that the United States is always encouraging all of Georgia's political parties to come into parliament and take care of the important business for the people of Georgia in parliament. Asked about the attempt to form a parliamentary investigative commission on judicial corruption, Ambassador Degnan noted that that is why you have created this institution, so it's never helpful when parties boycott the parliamentary sessions. She also echoed the U.S. State Department's recent move to sanction 4 Georgian judges for their involvement in corruption. Degnan stated that there was no mistake involved here. The United States has full confidence in the basis for the visa designations against these 4 individuals for their involvement in corrupt acts. This is The Checkpoints. I'm Elena Kvanchilashvili, author and the host of the show, and the Checkpoints team is ready to sum up the business and economics week for you. In January-March 2023, the external merchandise trade, excluding non-declared trade of Georgia, amounted to USD 4,783 million, 22.1% higher to the same period of 2022. The exports equaled USD 1 billion, which is 24.7% higher, while the imports stood at USD 3 billion, which is 21% higher. The negative trade balance was USD around 2 billion in January-March 2023, and its share in external trade turnover constituted 38.9%. In January-March 2023, the share of the top 10 trading partners by exports in the total exports of Georgia amounted to 80.9%. The top partners were Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Russia. In January-March 2023, the share of the top 10 trading partners by imports in the total imports of Georgia amounted to 69.4%. The top partners were Turkey, Russia, and United States of America. In January-March 2023, the share of the top 10 trading partners in the total external trade turnover of Georgia amounted to 67.9%. The top trading partners were Turkey, Russia, and China. In January-March 2023, motor cars claimed the first place in the list of top export items, equaling USD 411.8 million, with 28.2% of total exports. The exports of copper ores and concentrates totaled 205 million USD, and their share in the total exports amounted to 14.1%. The exported ferroalloys occupied the third place, standing at 81.8 million USD and constituting 5.6% of the total exports. The top import commodities in January-March 2023 were motor cars, whose imports equaled 474.5 million USD, which is 14.3% of the total imports. The petroleum and petroleum oils followed in the list with 251 million USD, which is 7.6% of imports. The petroleum gases and other gaseous hydrocarbons were third in the top import commodity list with 225 million USD, which is 6.8% of imports. Here is the main economic weekend outlook for this week.
We are launching a large-scale 5-year state program for the development of cities and resorts, and 1 billion lari will be allocated from the budget, Georgian Prime Minister Irakli Garibashvili stated at the government meeting. As the Prime Minister pointed out, under the program, buildings, cultural and historical sites will be rehabilitated and reconstructed in Borjami, Bakuriani, Kutaisi, Tkhaltobo, Tel Aviv, Zugdidi, Batumi, Tsketa, Stepantsminda, Mestia and Ghazbegi. Also, new recreation areas will be built and existing ones will be renovated. Our key goal is to gradually transform our country into a genuine European state. It must be a tiny, well-developed, beautiful state, cities, districts and villages. This is our plan. As mentioned earlier, 200 million lari will be allocated this year at the first stage. The Ministry of Regional Development and Infrastructure and the Municipal Development Fund will start working on it, and we will have results very soon, Irakli Garibashvili said. Georgia has a special potential for energy development from renewable resources. It's linked directly to our country's energy independence as well as economic and energy security, stated the Minister of Economy and Sustainable Development of Georgia, Levan Davitashvili, during the Renewable Energy Projects Conference. The event sought to inform private companies in the renewable energy sector about collaboration with foreign financial institutions to promote financing availability and to tell financial institutions about the latest advancements in Georgian energy. Levan Davitashvili says one of the top priorities of Georgian economy policy is energy direction. In January-March 2023, the external merchandise trade, excluding non-declared trade of Georgia, amounted to 4.8 billion USD, 1% higher to the same period of 2022, the National Statistics Service of Georgia reported. The exports equaled to 1.5 billion USD, while the imports stood at 3.3 billion USD. The negative trade balance was 1.8 billion USD in January-March 2023. According to Geostat, in January-March 2023, the top partners were Armenia, Azerbaijan and Russia. In January-March 2023, the share of top trading partners by imports in the total imports of Georgia amounted to 69.4%. The top partners were Turkey, Russia and United States. European Union delegation to Georgia published the updated information for travelers for the citizens from 59 countries including Georgia. From 2024, nationals of all 59 countries across the world that enjoy visa-free travel to the EU, including Georgia, will be required to obtain ETIAS, European Travel Information and Authorization System travel authorization, a new requirement introduced by the European Union to enter any of the 27 Schengen countries, Bulgaria, Romania or Cyprus. ETIAS is not a visa. The visa-free regime for short visits to the EU and Schengen countries remains in force for Georgian citizens, reads the statement. The Minister of Agriculture Shamugia says that one of the priority destinations for the country is the European Union market, where the exports of agricultural products increased by 21% in Q1 2023. He stated this in the Georgian parliament in the format of Ministers' Hour. According to him, in 2023, a growing trend of export of agro-food products has been observed. In particular, according to the data of the first quarter, there was a 29% increase in exports compared to the same period of the previous year, and the exports of Georgian agro-food products to the European Union increased by 21%. One of our priorities is the European Union market and the full use of its potential. After the signing of the free trade agreement, the exports of wine to the EU countries increased by 129%, alcoholic beverages by 26%, fruit and vegetable juices by 103%, non-alcoholic carbonated drinks by 4.7 times, and the exports of dry fruits by 5 times. Tea and citrus are also exported. It should be noted that after signing the free trade agreement, the European Union granted Georgia the right to export the following products of animal origin: honey and beekeeping products, sea products, animal feed, etc., the minister noted. Georgian Infrastructure Minister Irakli Karseladze on Tuesday said the landslide risks observed last month on the Rikoti Pass, a major crossing between the western and eastern parts of the country, had not been caused by the construction works on a new highways through the pass. Karseladze was commenting on the threats of landslides developing during the Rikoti highway construction after the recent media reports that said risks and had been caused by the heavy works on the section. The minister said cracks had been revealed 200 meters from the existing road after snow melted in area, leading to the section being closed to traffic on March 29 and drivers redirected to the Gomi Sachkheri Chiatura Zestafoni direction. Traffic on Rikoti Pass resumed under special regime on April 8.
500 Georgia, with the support of the Bank of Georgia and the Georgian Innovations and Technology Agency, launched the fourth batch of its world-known Startup Acceleration Program. Founders from over 40 countries applied, but only 12 got in. During the 12-week-long intensive training, founders will learn from 500 global mentors and international partners. BMG's Business Evening host Georgi Aronia sat down to talk with Pedro Vieira, managing partner at 500 Global, about the accelerator's fourth batch and the organization's plans for this year in Georgia.
Pedro, hi. It's a pleasure to host you here yet another time here at BMG, and now we have to celebrate the fourth batch of 500 Georgia.
Yeah, we do, and thank you for having me once again. Lots to celebrate.
So Pedro, before we jump in the particulars of the fourth batch, let's discuss what has happened ever since you entered the Georgian market. You know, how have been these 4 batches before?
Yeah, so we did 2 batches starting almost 3 years ago, roughly. Now we have invested in or accelerated close to or more than 40 companies. Several different countries involved in these batches. Many different verticals. The results right now look very promising. These companies always start very early with us, as you know, so the metrics that we have to assess their growth, like increase of sales or growth in number of users or fundraising, are all very positive. So we're very happy to see it progressing and looking forward for the next batches.
Let's jump to the fourth batch. You know, what was the selection process like? How many applications did you receive, and what was happening in your guys' mind when you saw these applications?
Yeah, so we do a pretty wide outreach campaign in a very broad region to attract many or as many applicants as we can, but ideally even the best applicants because we do tend to focus more on quality over quantity. But we got hundreds of applicants as always. The batch that we'll soon announce is going to have just little over 10 companies. So it was a very competitive process. Usually what we do is we screen these applicants for eligibility. Are they operating in the countries that we can accelerate or invest in? Are they the type of tech companies that we can invest? Are they submitting all the materials we need? That's a pretty initial eligibility screening. And then they go through a pretty thorough process of interviews with myself and several other experts and team members that allow us to understand how valuable our help for the companies can be, and if it makes sense to have them on our batch or not. And eventually we'll make the final decision and they make it into the batch.
What are some of the most popular sectors that we see companies from in this batch?
Yeah, I mean, we always try, even by design of the process, to have it as diverse as possible. In this batch, we did see a few more companies in HR tech, so companies developing technology for the HR sector. Also for ed tech, educational software and solutions for the educational space. But overall, still very mixed. We have applicants in Web3, FinTech, many different ones too.
Are there any trends you could highlight from, for instance, first batch till the fourth batch? How did the sectors change?
I don't think the sectors change much. Again, in this batch, we did see a little bit more HR tech for some reason, but it might have been just a glitch in the system, in the matrix. Overall, the difference I see is not so much in terms of sectors, is in terms of the quality and the stage of the companies that's applying. And a lot more companies now with global outreach, or from day zero, this ambition of doing businesses in many different countries in the region at the same time, rather than just focused on one specific country. So that shows we're getting more and more ambitious founders applying to the program, which is good.
During the last few batches, we saw that the 500 Georgia transformed into some sort of regional startup accelerator. We saw companies from Azerbaijan, Armenia, Ukraine, some other countries, Kazakhstan as well. Okay, let me ask you a different question. What would you attribute this trend for?
I mean, it's a combination. So obviously there's the fact that 500 is here with our brand in a program that is world-class, so that attracts founders. But Georgia also plays an important role in terms of the infrastructure that it offers for founders who want to work from here, set up their businesses here. It's a country where the ease of business is very high. Like, it's easy to make businesses, establish a business here. The talent is available here. Technical talent is very strong. The quality of life is good, and it is a country where people still feel safe harboring their teams, and that makes it very easy for us to attract founders from many diverse countries to come and work here together.
Do you envision this trend to continue in the future?
I do. I'm optimistic. I hope so. We'll continue working with our partners here and outside Georgia to make it so that we continue pushing for this hub as a place for us to run our program and continue attracting the best founders here.
Are there international founders, international startups in the fourth batch? And if yes, could you highlight some countries, for instance?
Yeah. It's a pretty diverse batch again. Again, the usual suspects: Armenia, Azerbaijan, Uzbekistan. More companies from Kazakhstan this time around. One company from Lithuania. So it's very, very diverse mix.
Oh, that's very nice to see country from the EU applying to 500 Georgia.
Yeah.
It could be nice trend setting.
Yeah. I mean, we are doing more and more efforts to work with companies in the Baltic region, for example. So hopefully this is just one of many. We had a Latvian company in the previous batches, now a Lithuanian company. So let's see if that starts a trend.
Awesome. Maybe Georgia can transform into some sort of Estonia one day. Regional tech hub. Pedro, we know that you have now a local team here in Tbilisi.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. Did the dynamics around 500 Georgia change ever since your team was established here? Do you feel that 500 Georgia has become some sort of center of gravity for local startups?
We want to believe so, and we'll continue. We have a team here, as you say, and we'll continue growing that team. And we believe that a physical presence here obviously does help with the dynamics of the program. And I think people know we're here, and they know we're doing this from here, but with a broader ambition, and they want to come here and work with us. And so we'll continue working with our local partners. Public and private sector in Georgia have been very supportive, Bank of Georgia, JITA on the government side. So we'll continue working with them and with the local team to boost the ecosystem here.
Pedro, what are the next steps for the startups in the fourth batch and their founders?
Yes, so now they're going through a 3-month program, intense, with the support of our resident mentors and visiting mentors, that will help them go, from 0 to 10 and from 10 to 1,000. So we're going to work with each company. We work on specific metrics that we know are relevant for that business model, for that sector that they're operating in. And we just help prepare them for the next big milestone, which is very likely another fundraise of much bigger dimension than the one we came in. And they're going through this program to try and scale faster, right? And prepare for that new milestone of fundraising a bigger round at better conditions for them.
And let me ask you last question. What are the future plans for 500 Georgia?
Well, 500 Georgia will continue for the foreseeable future, several years still already planned, right? The overall goal is to invest in at least 120 companies and train them out of here. So we're only getting started. We'll be here for a while.
Well, good luck to you, Pedro. Good luck to 500 Georgia, and thank you for establishing and promoting startup ecosystem here in Georgia.
Thank you so much. It's our pleasure to be doing this with you and others here in the country.
More on business news and outlook this week from our reporter Natia Taktakishvili.
Vaja Mebaghishvili, member of Supervisory Board of National Association of Realtors, declares that the trend of living close to the city in a quiet and clean environment is growing in the last 2 years. As he notes, the trend started amid the pandemic, and the demand for houses and land plots near Tbilisi is still increasing. According to the trend of recent years, demand and prices for land plots and houses near the city have increased. We have seen the price growth from 50% to 100%. This is caused by several factors, including the pandemic as well as the Russia-Ukraine war. During the summer period, demand for the houses near Tbilisi will increase even more, said Mebaghishvili. National Association of Realtors notes that recently the most popular places to live near Tbilisi are Tskhneti, Kojori, Didi, Tiromi village, Saguramo and Tbilisi's surroundings in general. Hotel Rooms Batumi, a member of Achara Group Hotel, will receive its first guest this summer. According to Achara Group, works are actively carried out, and as a result, more than 250 additional jobs will be created in Achara. Achara Group hopes that Rooms Batumi will make a great contribution to the development of the historical part of the city. Implementation of the project worth of $20 million was planned in 2020. However, the pandemic and the regulations delayed the opening date of the hotel until 2023. Georgi Salakaya, founder of wine-producing company Badagoni, declares that the company will increase exports to the European market up to 35% this year. According to him, the share of European markets stood at 27% in total sales in 2022. Badagoni operates in 32 countries worldwide. We started strong shipments with Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan this year. We are represented on the Indian and Bahrain markets, Georgi Salakaya said. As of him, Badagoni keeps the same share on the Russian market, but the company wants to develop in other countries as well. Last year, the wine-producing company had a 100% increase in Poland, as well as growth was observed in the German market. Children's clothing brand Limo, located in Gori, will export its products in Asia after Europe. According to the founder of the enterprise, Nino Giorgadze, the Georgian brand Limo will soon be sold in Korea as well. Limo products are already sold on the American Amazon. It can be purchased online via the Facebook and Instagram pages, as well as in the ASCII social concept store. Limo has been operating in the market since 2020, and the company currently employs 30 people. The enterprise produces new products from textile waste. According to its founder, local and foreign donor organizations help them to make this project. Villa Vagini will open a 3-story villa in the village of Vagini near Tbilisi National Park. Tatia Gabissiani, the founder of Villa Vagini, told TV program Women's Narrative. We have a 2,000 square meter yard with a 3-story villa for 6-8 people and one cottage for 2 people, she explains. In addition, next to the villa, there is a wine cellar where the founder produces 3 types of wine: Panchkara, Katsiteli and Saperavi. There is a panoramic room with a fireplace on the top of the cellar, and there is a sauna. It's a plan to add an outdoor space and a bakery to the yard for the summer. As for the prices, Tatia Gabissiani notes that she tried her best to make the prices affordable to everyone, so the accommodation cost of the cottage amounts to 250 lari, while on weekends the price totals to 350 lari. Representatives of Georgian tourist companies note that the price for travel have increased by about 20% for 2023. As Yage Devanishvili, director of travel company Check-in Travel, told BFDG, the price increase will be observed especially in May. The cost of vacation has definitely increased compared to the last year, as prices are growing for hotel accommodation as well as air tickets. Travel price has increased over 10-20%, she notes. The price increase for the travel is also confirmed by the company Pegas Touristic Georgia. According to the commercial director of the company, Salome Beraya, the prices are individual and they depend on the travel destinations. However, she notes that generally, tourist packages became expensive by at least 20%. Sopo Jorbenadze, general director of Grato Greenhouses, says that despite the price increase, demand for plants is growing year over year. According to the general director of Grato Greenhouses, the prices on local seedlings has also grown. As for the imported ones, their value mainly depends on the exchange rate. Sopo Jorbenadze notes that the price on the local products has increased by 20%. She talks about the increase in logistic costs. According to her, shipping price growth significantly affects the business. Europe is the leading supplier for plants in Georgia. Most of them are imported from Italy, Poland, Spain and Turkey. The price of imported trees and plants starts from 20 lari and goes up to 4,000 lari. As for the local market, Georgian nurseries are mainly located in Kakheti and Samegrelo. Those nurseries increased their product price by 20% this year. Mineral water Nabeghlavi was exported to the United Arab Emirates and Abu Dhabi and Dubai after 2 years of work. Michael Srimonishvili, managing partner of Margebeli Holding, explains that the product is represented in the largest hypermarket chain in Arabia, Lulu. According to the managing partner of Margebeli Holding, the company will work actively to fully utilize the Arab markets due to the geopolitical environment in the region. One market should not have more than 5 or 10% share in our portfolio, so we take specific steps regarding the diversification of the market, said Michael Srimonishvili, the managing partner of Margebeli Holding. A new Georgian ski clothing brand Coco appeared on the market 1 month ago. As Tamar Urshadze, director of Coco, explains, the North Face was the source of the inspiration. We wanted to create clothes in the style of North Face, and the first collection is ski sportswear. There is no brand in Georgia that produces this line. We are the first, and we hope that we will be successful, Tamar Urshadze says. Georgian sportswear is sold both online and in Georgia designer stores in Paliashvili Street. The price for the first collection of Coco ranges from 95 lari to 200 lari.
And this is all for today. Before we meet again, follow us on BM.G for more updates on business and economics. And I'm leaving you off with answers to some insightful questions like, is fintech the gateway to commercial success? Why is fintech so attractive in a country where commercial banks are very efficient? What is the government's role in developing the Georgian startup ecosystem? These are some of the questions that BMG's Business Evening host Georgi Aronia discussed with Colin Donahue, co-director at Startup Grind Tbilisi, and Levan Shalamberidze, East Asia Equity Lead at the International Financial Corporation. So stay tuned.
Hi there. The Georgian startup community is taking the world by storm. With Pulsar AI's phenomenal exit, Georgian founders appeared on the global investment scouting map. After Pulsar AI, many more Georgian companies appeared on the US market, with Theneo, the winner of the Web Summit startup competition, being the prime example. Yet along with the US, Georgian startups are expanding in Asia too. Payzy is growing in Uzbekistan while Kernel is expanding in India. One could argue that over the years, Georgian founders found their niche. It's fintech, undoubtedly. From Germany-founded Raisin to Georgia-founded Payzy and Space International, serving millions of customers in Germany, the United States of America, and Uzbekistan, founders are looking deeper into the marriage of finance and technologies. Yet, many questions about the Georgian startup ecosystem are still left unanswered. Is fintech the gateway to commercial success? Why is fintech so attractive in a country where commercial banks are very efficient? What is the government's role in the developing of Georgian startup ecosystem? These are some of the questions I'll ask two leading Georgian experts today. I'm joined by Colin Donahue, co-director at Startup Grind Tbilisi, and Levan Shalamberidze, East Asia Equity Lead at the International Financial Corporation. While Startup Grind Tbilisi has brought insights from deeply experienced venture capitalists such as Bill Reichard and Marvin Liao, and played a crucial role in connecting Georgian founders to the international investors, Levan Shalamberidze has managed investments of over $1 billion with the mandate to help startups from developing economies scale. Hi, gentlemen. Thank you for being here at BMG. I'm very happy to have this interview about the Georgian startup ecosystem, because talking about it and finding the ways to develop this little community is one of the most important things we could do.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Let me begin with a very broad and general questions that I will pose to both of you, because I would like to get to as many perspectives as I could. So let's start with the local overview. Let's start with you, Colin. Could you summarize what is going on in the Georgian startup ecosystem today?
Sure. So I've been here 7 years. And over that time, things have gone from a very, very low baseline where there weren't really internationally competitive startups to where over the last couple of years, more and more startups have started raising, multi-million-dollar seed rounds, have been getting customers internationally, and have really positioning themselves to scale. So part of what's happening is there's an awareness of what a high-growth, venture-backable startup is, because there's so many things you can start that are a start. But when you look at startups, it's more in the terminology of venture capital, right? Venture investors are looking for something that can achieve very high scale, very, very quickly. So they're looking for a certain type of investment. Those investments weren't really on the market now, but Georgian founders are starting to really get a feel for that. And so Georgia's really, like you said, getting on the map.
Yeah, look, Colin's been here for 7 years, but I've been away for more than 20 years from Georgia, and and I've started to look at the Georgian startup ecosystem maybe like 2 years ago when I was working from here during the COVID period. And I have to say I was very pleasantly surprised in terms of the new startups that are starting and developing, and the quality of those founders is something that we can be proud of. I think there is a lot of work to be done, and on the flip side, there is a huge growth potential for these startups, and maybe we can talk about what are the challenges and what needs to be done, but I think it's a great start, and I'm very optimistic about the Georgian startup ecosystem here.
Well, let's continue with challenges, and the biggest challenge, in my opinion, is basically non-existence of venture capital. But then again, given the Georgian context, on one side we don't have venture capital, but on the other side we have GITA, Georgia's Innovation and Technology Agency, which in a way acts like a source of first money for a lot of Georgian startups. Let me ask you this, Colin, based on your experience, how good of a job does GITA do here in Georgia?
I mean, it's a complex, it's a complex question. But what I would say is when you look at countries that are working to develop startup ecosystems, I think the work that JITA has done has been very useful. When you look at the World Bank analysis of the amount of capital raised and exit value and so on and so forth, I mean, you're approaching $100 million. And for an early startup ecosystem where there wasn't much momentum initially, this is a very significant step forward. So I feel like we've gone from where things are sort of at a standstill to where there is some momentum, right? Is it going to go on its own like a freewheel? Not yet. But I do feel like there's been movement towards that. I mean, has everything they've done been perfect? No, that's just not the way life is. But there are certain strategies that have been very effective and that have both gotten startups moving and also improved the quality of the founders' mindset and thinking about startups.
Levan, let me reposition this question to you. In your opinion, how sustainable is the model that JITA has? And in general, how sustainable is when a governmental agency supports, doesn't support finances directly startups? And could you bring maybe some best case examples from the world?
Sure. So, look, I think when we think about the best startup ecosystem in different countries, in my mind, there are three main requirements. One is the education centers that can produce the tech talent. The other one is regulatory environment and maybe cultural aspects in terms of innovation culture of that place, of that country. And the third is the venture capital, the funding side of it, right? So I think on the regulatory things side of things and the cultural aspects, I think we're well advanced. Of course, there is always more to do, but the easiness of starting business, the open-mindedness of the National Bank that is trying to help startups, and for example, they're doing this, the approach of sandboxes, allowing the new startups to start with baby steps and then putting more regulatory burden on them later on rather than from the beginning. The education is also, there needs to be improvement, but there are some education institutions in Georgia, whether it's Free University or Caucasus University or the Kutaisi International University that is producing some tech talent already. But I think what is really missing is the venture capital funding. I think it's right now non-existent. So that's why the role that JITA is playing is quite important. And I'll bring up the example of Israel, and I might bring it up again a couple more times, is that in Israel, with a vibrant startup ecosystem, initially the government actually took on the role of supporting those startups because the venture capital was not available either. Because it's not just the money aspect of it, it's also the expertise. How do you invest? How do you support? How do you make them grow, right? So the venture capital is not just the money, it's also the skill set. So the government stepped in, they started the grants, they also created the first venture capital fund. So from that context, what JITA is doing is very important. I think there's an idea of also doing some kind of fund that JITA will participate together with the outside capital, the private capital. So I think they're trying their best and they're on the right track. We need more. We need private equity, private venture capital to also step in, but it's a process.
So in this process, what could be JITA's role? I understand that in the beginning, giving the early finance to companies is very good, but now how I look at it is that we are somehow in the middle position with our top startups. They already are very good, they expanded internationally, but then the new generation of startups, they are not so well adapted as the first generation were, which is basically a natural process. We all understand that. But could, for instance, JITA somehow in later years transform from financing institution to some sort of intermediary institution that will, for instance, talk to Silicon Valley VCs, to talk to Asian VCs, and then somehow bringing them into Georgia? What's your take on that, Colin?
Yeah. So I think one thing that's very important is development. As Levan said, is the functions of a venture fund are not just providing capital, right? So these networking functions, if you have a GP here and a GP sitting in Silicon Valley who's networked with all of the follow-on funding sources, large customers, national media in the U.S., for example, there are incredible benefits to these networks. By contrast, there is a bunch of Georgian capital from individuals and companies going into startups where the investors have no idea really what a startup is. They don't understand the dynamics of success in a startup as it's different than a conventional business. And if you approach a startup as a conventional business, it is not going to succeed at scale, and you're going to have bad outcomes on average. So it's much better to create incentives for those folks. And I know startups that are getting multi-million-dollar investments from Georgia investors, unintermediated, right? The money just goes into the startup, and it's like, good luck, guys. Like, you know, I know a guy in New York who's a banker, and other than that, you're on your own. And at this stage in the development of the ecosystem, that is very, very dangerous because they're probably going to have bad outcomes that were preventable. So if you have incentives where the government says, okay, we're going to screen the qualifications of the GPs, and we're going to match private sector money coming in, you create an incentive for the private sector to put money in, and that then you have some sort of adults in the room, if you will, or, you know, gray hair people, you know, who understand and they've seen the up cycles and the down cycles. Now so many founders are just shocked because it's so hard to raise money. And it's like, yeah, they were raising money in an up cycle, you're not going to be able to do that. So I think having some real experience and gravitas wrapped around the capital is very important. If you're just sticking money on someone's cap table, you're not necessarily doing them a favor in getting into international markets and scaling quickly.
Let me switch to fintech now, because as I mentioned in my introduction, and we can always, all of us can see that some of the most prominent, you know, leading prime examples of Georgian startups are all basically in fintech, you know, and they have been, we've seen this tremendous example of Tamas Georgadze and Raisin and doing incredible business in Germany, now in the United States of America as well.
Kaspi.
In Kaspi as well, yeah, exactly. I forgot about him. Yeah, that's a very good point. Kaspi. Then we have Payzy, we have Kernel in India. You know, all these incredible minds working on financial technologies. So you know, I've heard this notion during my studies in Europe that the goal of any fintech is to be acquired by a bank. But then when I somehow entered from the outside perspective, when I look at the Georgian startup ecosystem, I see that the trends in Europe and trends in Georgia are very different. And mainly, in my opinion, it's because the Georgian banking sector is very developed. It's developed both from operational side. We saw in 2022 they had over 2 billion lari in profits, and it's incredibly efficient from the customer side, because you can basically do whatever you want from your phone. You know, in this environment, why and how is Georgian fintech industry flourishing? Levan, let me ask you.
Sure. So first of all, let me start by agreeing that the Georgian banking sector is well developed. So I travel and work on many developing countries globally, being part of IFC, which is part of the World Bank Group. So we are aware of the banking sectors in all the large and small markets, and Georgia probably has one of the most developed banking sectors. And the fact that the two banks are listed on London Stock Exchange is already a sign of that, right?
It's amazing.
So now, so that creates both a challenge and also an opportunity for a fintech. I think Georgia itself as a market is small enough for fintechs to just succeed on this market. So my view is that the Georgian fintech should be focusing on regional expansion from the get-go. Create something, use the expertise that has been accumulated in this market, whether it's hiring bankers from the banking sector of Georgia, and then looking at going, whether it's Turkey or Uzbekistan or East Asia. I'm actually a big proponent of moving into Asia. I think Asia is today it's the center for economic growth. More than half of the growth is coming from Asia, and then we are quite close to it actually. So I think we need to look at that, and I'm very happy to see both Kernel and Payzy actually going in that direction. So I think that's the right step. The challenge is there I don't think you can beat the banks because they're too big and quite innovative in Georgia, but you can use that expertise and to your advantage and move and do something else in other markets as well outside of Georgia.
But do you really need to beat the banks here in Georgia? You know, because isn't it better to use banks which are again expanding internationally as well together with startups? You know, we see TBC Bank, for instance, launching its neobank TBC Uz in Uzbekistan. You know, and then we saw several Georgian startups also joining this direction. You know, Colin, in your opinion and in your experience, because you know all of these guys and you worked with all of these people, what could be the synergies between Georgian fintechs and traditional banks?
Well, I'd like to pick up on something you're saying there that's a little adjacent to that, which is I think it's very important for startups in Georgia and business people who are thinking about investing in startups, policymakers, that we always think about expanding internationally. So Georgia is a sandbox, you can try things out, but the more you can take on international markets, the more you're able to pull in resources, foreign currency, and other resources into the country. So I think that's an incredibly beneficial trend for the health of the economy and for the benefit of everybody, not just the startup, but Georgian society. The synergies, I do think there could be more synergies. So when you look at Uzbekistan, TBC is strong in the Uzbekistan market, and not just for the startups, but I'm also on the board of the American Chamber of Commerce, right? And we hosted a thing with AmCham from Uzbekistan, and there were a lot of Georgian companies that wanted to go into Uzbekistan. So I think if we can look at how companies from Georgia might work together to make the right connections, find the trusted people to work with, and really navigate these foreign markets, that's really going to increase, I think, the effectiveness. And another good trend is this globalize, right? So if there are Georgians overseas, you can connect with those folks, then you find the right people to work with. So I think one of the synergies is just finding the right people to work with and sharing intelligence about the market.
Let me add an additional question to that. How easy is it, in your opinion, to connect to, so for instance, if you're a guy, fintech guy, startup guy, for you, how easy is it to find someone abroad, you know, and how efficiently because work, for instance, diaspora works, you know, diaspora questions, how can person easily expand overseas without being somehow exposed to that particular country in the past?
Yeah, I think it's a lot about building your reputation and your relationships. And I always tell founders, reputation, relationships are a lot of what's going to help you with growth. So founders, even before they have a startup idea, should be developing their international networks, doing little things to help other people, doing little projects, like where you build your reputation so that when you need somebody to vouch for you, they know you and they can open the door to the next person. So really, I encourage people, so say you want to find an investor. Don't just like go right at that investor. Find the people who can open the doors and get you there. So a lot of it is sort of relationships, you know, step by step. There are also commercial things you can do, but really the strongest, I believe, is when you're coming from trusting relationships where you've known people for a little while and they're opening doors for you. I don't know, Levon, if you have a different perspective.
Yeah, look, I mean, I'll actually provide a word of caution because we invest globally and we've seen a number of cases of successful expansion to other countries, but we have also seen a lot of failures. And it's quite difficult actually because no country works the same way as other countries. It's always different, whether it's regulations or the culture or relationships, different levels of corruption. So it's not easy. But I think in Georgia we do have this expertise that is better than most of our regional countries in our regions. So there is the ability and capability to transfer some of this knowledge that has been accumulated here to other countries, and it's also a necessity because the Georgia by itself is a small enough market, and the other opportunities in other markets are large. But it has to be done step by step. I agree with you. It's building the relationships of understanding those countries, having a criteria, where to go, why, how to select those countries. It's not easy, but it can be done. So I would encourage them to plan ahead.
And I think also incorporating local leadership. So you look at like the example of Kernel, it's like a Georgian company, a small Georgian company, they're fundraising to do something in India. When you talk to investors, they're like, what? Like this is crazy talk. Like, but they have taken the time to learn the market, so on and so forth, and now they've hired an excellent person who's going to lead the country operations in India. So if you find that trusted person who's respected by a lot of people, that's where everything flows more easily. So really, you need to find the right people who you can bet on to lead in certain markets, either geographic or even sectoral, right? Like if you have different services, you want to find that key individual who's trusted in that sector as well. So yeah, it's a lot about the systems of how people trust each other, I believe.
In recent years, there have been several developments, several major developments, I would say, in the Georgian startup ecosystem. One of them is when 500 startups, or now known as 500 Global, entered the Georgian market. Now, yearly, they're doing the Startup Acceleration Project, which is incredible. But another thing that I would like to highlight, that with years passing by, we see more and more international founders participating in 500 Georgia's programs. You know, we see people from Azerbaijan, Armenia, Kazakhstan, Ukraine as well. You know, so somehow we see the Georgian startup ecosystem, and Georgia itself is somehow transforming into a regional hub for different sorts of technologies. And at the same time, we saw after the war in Ukraine began a huge influx of people, the big part of which are tech people, because they work remotely, they get solid salaries, and then they prefer to work from Georgia. You know, so let me ask you two questions. One is, in your opinion, you know, this influx of people, how good is it, or is it bad for Georgian local talent? Or if we look at it from the other side, will it help to increase competitiveness and the overall level of development in Georgian tech guys?
I definitely think it's a very positive thing that is happening, and I was also slightly surprised that we were all afraid when the war started what the effect it would have on the economy of Georgia, but we've seen positive effect, and we've also seen influx of those tech talent that is now based in Georgia and working from here. And this is actually putting Georgia on the map now. So more and more people, international contacts I have, they mention that we understand Georgia is already acting a little bit as a hub. I think the Georgian food and the Georgian climate helps. People want to be based where they can enjoy their lives. But the other aspects are there too. The time zone is also perfect. I'm recently moved to Singapore. As an example, Georgia is right in between London and Singapore, so you can work on both Europe and you can also work on Asia. So that helps. The regulatory environment helps, and the competitiveness will rise. I think people learn from each other. So once we have more people joining and working from here, that's also positive for Georgian entrepreneurs as well.
Colin, are we there yet? Or some things have to be done for Georgia to become not only fintech hub, but in general regional tech hub?
Yeah, I think we're gaining momentum. We're definitely not where we need to be for it to be at critical mass. You know, but as Levan has said, there's a bunch of talent, you know, that has moved in from, you know, Russia, Ukraine, Belarus. The question is, you know, the people who are our allies, right, and who support Georgia, support Georgia's territorial integrity, and respect the country that they're in. I think we do need to embrace particularly those people and integrate them. Also, I see so many other people came during COVID. You know, I was in an elevator in Batumi at the Hilton, and I heard somebody speaking in American accent. I was like, oh, you know, where are you from? Oh, from the U.S., blah, blah. What are you doing here? It's COVID, I could work from anywhere, so figured why not Batumi? So there's already a lot of movement of people to Georgia just because of the amenity-rich environment. And when you look at hubs, okay, Estonia is great, but in February in Estonia, I'm not going to go hang out there just because it's a nice place to hang out. I'm sorry, no offense. So I think there will be a natural pull of people from around the world as laborers become more flexible, as founders look for the place where they want to grow their company from. San Francisco is very expensive. London's very expensive. All these places, they have a scene. So you want to stay there for the scene. But if we can get a critical mass where there are brilliant people doing global things here, then that can just multiply itself incredibly. And there are some amazing people. Nobody knows they're here. Like you were here. Like Levon, this amazing international investor in VC is under the radar here. But if we can pull people together and showcase that to the world, I think it's a very good opportunity now.
I'll tell you one example. So I'm not going to mention the name, but there is a digital bank, a global one, that is starting operations, and they looked at a number of countries to start their business. They looked at Dubai, they looked at Cyprus, they looked at either Estonia or Lithuania, one of those, and they looked at Tbilisi. They chose Tbilisi. So they are in the process of application within National Bank. If that goes well, this will be another startup choosing to start their business and expand regionally out of Georgia.
Well, that's incredible, and I guess once it's official, we can discuss that with startup founders and you guys as well in more detail. But let me ask you this, and I'll ask you to both of you. So what should be done? What are the necessary steps, and what are the necessary preconditions that have to be in Georgia for it to somehow officially develop into a regional tech hub?
Yeah, I mean, the way that we met is through some discussions about a fintech hub in Georgia, right? And there are certain things, like Levon said, I mean, education, venture capital, so on and so forth. I think part of what needs to happen is very specific education that is about emerging trends. What does the future look like? Not what has been taught for the last 30 years, in accounting books or whatever. It's what are the trends? How do you connect with the trends? Some really responsive things like intensives for executives, maybe in the banking sector, maybe in startups, to really be ahead of the curve on some things. Boot camps and other non-traditional education things that can get people moving really fast on very timely targets. Because once something's in a textbook, it's old news, right? So I think we need education to be on the cutting edge. And I'll just say on the capital side, if we have meaningful, high talent and high experience venture capital funds, that will attract so many founders. It'll attract so many attention. It'll accelerate the ecosystem overall. So we need to have these very credible internationalized venture funds with the international connections for the founders to grow.
Yeah, so I already mentioned the regulatory side of things. I think for the fintech specifically, National Bank is already doing a good job in my view. The regulatory sandbox is supporting the startups, attracting them, giving them the space to develop, because you cannot apply the same standards to startups as the traditional, more mature companies. Education centers, I think we need to do more, and I think in terms of our fintech hub discussions that we've had, we want to also bring some of the international experience, and whether it's a fintech course. We are relying on our colleagues that have done this in other countries. One thing that I would say on people who are participating in the startup ecosystems, they're willing to share. They're willing to come to new countries. They're willing to teach. So I think we need to tap into that international resources. The most challenging right now, I see those two. I think we can manage is the venture capital. We need to get them in Georgia. I think it's starting a little bit. We see signs. We did not see any signs, 5 years ago. Now we're seeing some venture capital funds getting interested in Georgia. And that's a bit of maybe an uphill struggle right now, but we need to actually get them interested. And I would count on regional funds. So whether it's Turkish funds or London-based funds or Israeli funds, I think we would have better chance to attract them here, to open a presence and have presence here. Maybe GITA can also play a role in terms of co-participating with them and supporting them and encouraging them.
Well, let's hope that all the parties, media included, plays its role, and then somehow we put Georgia on the global map in terms of tech, not only fintech, but all the other technologies that are there. Thank you very much, gentlemen. It was an honor to host you here at BMG. I'm certainly sure that we'll continue to talk about these and other topics in the future as well.
Yeah, I think we have some good stuff coming up, so really excited to share it with you when it's baked.
Of course, absolutely.
Thank you. Great to be here. Thanks.
The Checkpoint is presented by GM Pharma, the first international multinational pharmaceutical company in Georgia. GM Pharma, to serve those who need it most.